Welcome everybody to this Radio Murchie Town Hall. This is Steve Rao, your host, and we are here today with a very special guest, the Honorable Supreme Court Justice of North Carolina, Justice Mark Davis, and we want to welcome you all to the show. This is a live broadcast on Radio Murchie, the Triangle Region's largest South Asian radio station, 99.9 FM HD4, 1490 AM, 101.9 FM, and also aired in some cities in the United States, Baltimore, Philly area. And we welcome Justice Davis to the show. We'll also be sharing this on Facebook. We had some issues today getting on the Facebook site, but we will be sharing this across the Justice Davis. Welcome to the show.
Steve, thank you tonight. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much. So tell us a little bit about your background. Obviously, you're a lawyer, but today we got about 12 minutes on the radio, and we really want to spend time talking about the Supreme Court of North Carolina. What is its role in the state, the history of the state, the composition of the court, the kinds of cases you see. Tell us real quickly about your background for those of us listening today.
Sure. I'm a lifelong North Carolinian. I grew up in Fayetteville. I went to Chapel Hill for undergraduate and law school, worked in private practice for 13 years. Then I spent 5 years at the Department of Justice. I was general counsel to the governor for 2 years. Then I served on the North Carolina Court of Appeals for 6 years before Governor Cooper appointed me to the Supreme Court in March of 2019.
Okay, that's great. And so tell us a little bit about the state Supreme Court. What is the role of the Supreme Court in North Carolina? What kind of cases do you all review? And maybe for the audience, there's often a lot of confusion about the different levels of the court system, especially when we go in and vote in these elections. We see all these judges and we don't know how one interacts with the other.
Sure. So every state has a highest court. In North Carolina, it's the Supreme Court. The point of entry for in the judicial system is at the trial court level, which in North Carolina is Superior Court or District Court. If you have a ticket or you're accused of a crime or you're in a lawsuit, that's where you start. And there's ultimately a winner and a loser. The losing party has the right to appeal the case to the North Carolina Court of Appeals. And then the Court of Appeals makes a ruling. There's a winner and a loser. And the losing party can ask us, the Supreme Court, to hear the case. And if the Court of Appeals panel was split 2-1, the losing party has an automatic right to appeal to the Supreme Court. If it was 3-0, then the losing party has to ask us to take it in our discretion, which we do if we think it's an important case, a high-profile case, a case involving the Constitution, or otherwise if there's some compelling reason for us to hear it. And then very quickly, there are some cases that we take automatically. Any appeal from the North Carolina Business Court comes directly to us, and any case involving the termination of someone's parental rights comes directly to us. So it's sort of a mixed bag of things we have to take and things we choose to take, if that makes sense.
Also, these cases come before the Supreme Court. So you've got the district court, which is taking your common, criminal cases, things like that. And then you've got your state Supreme Courts that are taking these different cases. And how do you get to the higher court? The higher court would be the Court of Appeals or the U.S. Supreme Court, correct?
Yes, so most of our cases come from the North Carolina Court of Appeals. And about 80% of our cases deal with issues of North Carolina law as opposed to federal law. But about 20% of the time we do rule on issues involving federal law. And when that happens, the losing party in our court can ask the U.S. Supreme Court to hear the case. And once in a while they do. Usually the Supreme Court in Washington takes about maybe one case from North Carolina.
Okay.
So we're the final word on state law issues, but on federal law issues, of course, the U.S. Supreme Court is the final word.
Okay. How many justices are on the Supreme Court?
So we have 7 on our Supreme Court, and we're all elected in North Carolina, unlike the federal system and several other states that have different methods. In North Carolina, judges run for election and re-election.
Okay. And your terms are for 8 years?
Correct. We have 8-year terms.
Okay. And she's a friend of mine, but the Chief Justice, what role does the Chief Justice, it's also a separate office that's elected. What role play on the Supreme Court?
The Chief Justice wears one hat is doing the same thing I and the other members of the court do. She's responsible for ruling on the cases that come before us and writing opinions. But separate and apart from that, she's the head of the judicial branch of government, which, as you know, Steve, is a co-equal branch of government with the legislative branch and the executive branch. So she has two full, one being a judge like the rest of us, and the other administrating the entire judicial branch of government. So it's a very full plate being Chief Justice.
Yeah, and when you write your opinions, you have clerks that work for you, which is a very prestigious law school, and they help you write your opinions, do the research, right? Cite case law when we read these opinions from our high court, Supreme Court.
We are fortunate to have the resources to have law clerks. It's sort of coming full circle for me because when I came out of law school, I worked for a judge. So the process really has come full circle for me. And it's wonderful having bright young legal minds to help us do the research, work through the issues, and help us with the writing of the opinion. So it's a great resource to have.
That's fantastic. What is a typical day of, and we're going to talk about the COVID. We couldn't end this interview today without talking about COVID-19, how it affected courts. We're using this Zoom to do the interview. But tell me a little bit about a typical day and week of a Supreme Court justice.
Yeah, I can pretty much answer that. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I can answer that in one word, and that is reading. My goodness. If you do not love reading legal documents, you ought not try to be an appellate judge because that is such an important part of what we do. In the Supreme Court, there are no page limits to the briefs that are submitted by lawyers. So it's unusual for us to read over 1,000 pages, sometimes 1,000 pages in a particularly complex case. And when we have hearings or oral arguments, as we call them, like we do in 2 weeks, we hear 13 cases at a time. So if you do the math, that's a lot of reading. And I'm holding up the camera with my glasses. You can see why all judges wear glasses because we strain our eyes so much.
Yeah, I mean, and is there ever a time, I just had this question come in, where they can go, people can go watch the arguments?
Yes, this has been a recent innovation. We're always looking for ways to make our work more transparent to the public because it's obviously a good thing when people see what their elected officials do. And a lot of people just don't know much about how the court system. So we have finally gotten the technology to stream our oral arguments live. So even if you're not in the courtroom, you can watch them. And we hope people enjoy it. It certainly is informative. And I think you're going to ask me about COVID, but in the age of COVID, we're doing all of our, even the lawyers and the judges are not in the same room.
Okay, so how does that work? They come in and will argue using Zoom or whatever technology you're using. You guys are at home or wherever you are, maybe in an office, and you're hearing the arguments.
It's totally virtual, and everyone is in a different place. The lawyer offices are their homes. We are in different places. A few of us are still working at the courthouse, but most are working remotely. So you've got all these people connected on screen doing this important work of the court. It's really a fascinating thing, and it's worked pretty well.
It's worked well. So, it's interesting. It just seems like it's such a different model in terms of expediting cases, reviewing work product. You're able to do your reading, come in prepared. The justices ask their questions of the lawyers make their arguments, and it's business as normal.
It really is. It's amazing, and it's very gratifying getting done, and it's getting done in a timely fashion. A lot by my friends because I'm not the most technological person in the world, but this system is so user-friendly that even I have been able to use it. And the lawyers can hear the questions from us. We can hear the lawyers' arguments. It's just a good thing. We've all learned how to do things differently and hopefully more efficiently in the age of COVID, like everybody else.
And before we ask a few more questions, before we let you go, I just got a question came in about technology. So, we have data, artificial intelligence. automation. Do you believe, as a Supreme Court justice, and I know you have an administrative office of the court, that's another question. So your branch of government is a separate branch of government. So even though we have a Secretary of Technology for the state, the administrative office of the courts has their own CIO, their own technology team. But do you believe that technology is something that the courts now have to really keep up with in terms of just the level of service, the workload, and keeping up modern times we live in today?
We really do need to take advantage of technology. And frankly, North Carolina has not always been able to do that. Of course, we're reliant on funding from the legislature. There's certain programs that we're really hoping we will obtain funding for. The most basic thing on our wish list is electronic filing. In the year 2020, people really should not have to drive to the courthouse with a stack of paper and file it manually across a window to an assistant clerk of court. We're really in the age now where that should be done electronically, which is the way most other states do it. We're trying really hard to get the resources to make electronic filing a reality in all 100 counties. That's our biggest priority.
Or like if you get a speeding ticket, and like instantaneously having that somebody's device or phone so that they would automatically remind themselves, because that's happened. Sometimes people forget, they don't write the court date. Citizen engagement, the court docket, the cases. As those that are disenfranchised, that may not have the ability, they may not have here, how are they going to get? So that probably is a topic for our time, but I think we often don't think about how technology can help us in the courts. So we really appreciate you answering that question. Before we let you go, I want you to talk about your book that you've written, but real quickly, has there been any cases in the history of our state that the court has heard that have made North Carolina a different state in terms of its future? Is there anything that comes to mind as a historian of the court? I know you know a lot about the court.
Well, I think there are a number of cases our court has decided over its 200 years that have had a profound effect on North Carolina. But I think the most recent example that a lot of people are familiar with was a landmark case from the late 1990s called Leandro, which had to do with the right to a sound basic education under the North Carolina Constitution. And our court, in an opinion written by then Chief Justice Burley Mitchell, held for the first time that the guarantee to a free basic education in our state constitution were really not just words on a paper, that they had a practical meaning, and that North Carolina as a state owed to all of its school children the opportunity to obtain a sound basic education, no matter where you live, no matter whether your county is rich or poor. You as a child are entitled to the resources necessary to give you access to a sound basic education. It was a hugely important decision. We are still dealing with the after effects of that decision. And I personally think it was a wonderful thing for the state of North Carolina. And it's been so important for public education in this state.
Well, that really, we have a lot of people listening to this show with education. So that's really important, the Leandro case. Real quickly before we end the radio part of this interview, we're going to go another 15 minutes in the live town hall. What is your book? I've heard you're an author.
Well, thank you for asking. Yeah, I won't bore you with the whole story, but while I was serving on the Court of Appeals about 4 years ago, I decided to write a book about the Supreme Court, having no idea I would be fortunate enough to serve on the Supreme Court.
Oh, wow.
But it's about a period in the Supreme Court's history from 1986 to 1995, when a man named Jim Exum was Chief Justice. It was a very innovative and progressive period for the court. And so that's what the book's about, and it's called A Warren Court of Our Own, and it really was a joy to write.
Oh, A Warren Court of Our Own. Okay, we'll go look for that book. Well, we want to thank Richie for hosting the session. We're going to continue with a live town hall. We just want to thank you all. This will be aired next week, next Sunday at 4 o'clock. And just as a reminder for those listening before we let Radio Murchie go, a big Saturday, the 73rd Indian Independence Day, August 15, 1947, when India, through the freedom movement of Mohandas K. Gandhi, freed India from the British Empire. And such a great day, and the a whole notion of civil disobedience, satyagraha, insistence on the truth, inspired the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King to lead his own civil disobedience movement. The whole notion of peaceful protest, which we still today are seeing after the death of George Floyd, the death of John Lewis, the great American hero, that the fight for justice and freedom continues. So on Saturday, there will be a virtual event with the Hindu Society of North Carolina, where they will hoist the flag of the United States and India. I will be interviewing Mr. Swadesh Chatterjee at 10 a.m. live on Murchie to talk about the U.S.-India relationship, past, present, and future. But the most important thing is Democratic nominee for the presidency of the United States, former Vice President Joe Biden, will be conducting a town hall at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with the former Indian ambassador, U.S. Ambassador to India, Richard Verma, Swadesh Chatterjee, chairman of the U.S.-India Friendship Council, Cary resident, Jake Sullivan, Sonal Shah, Nisha Biswal, all of them worked in the cabinet of Hillary Clinton or in the State Department. They're going to be, talking about the U.S.-India relationship in a Biden administration. So it's going to be very interesting. So I'm sorry I went over my time, but I wanted to get that all out there. And Justice, we would love for you to come and listen to that if you have time. We know you're very busy, but it's going to be good. We have a huge Indian community in North Carolina, and we want people to know about the Indian independence movement. So we're not letting you go yet, but Radio Murchie, thank you for hosting this live broadcast. And we hope the citizens have enjoyed listening to one of our honorable Supreme Court justices. Thank you very much. Now we're going to continue with our town hall. We got a few more questions coming in. Justice Davis, I just got a question from a college student who wanted to know, do you have any advice for young aspiring lawyers in terms of like, if they want to become a judge one day? Is that something that you always thought you would be, or do you just go in there deciding what kind of law you want to practice? I can't answer that question, even though I have a law background, but I'm more in the tech sector in addition to being a public official. So do you have an answer to that question? What advice do you have for this Tar Heel?
Sure. Well, thank you for the question. Everybody has a different path. I'm a big proponent of judicial clerkships, serving as a law clerk to a judge when you finish law school. It's something I did, as I mentioned earlier, and a lot of law students do. It's a wonderful way to learn about the judicial system and learn what judges actually do. And then you see if you have any interest in trying to pursue that career path yourself. But in terms of general advice, the practice of law, it's a wonderful job, but it is a very, very demanding job. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of your energy. It takes a lot of your emotion. You become very invested in your cases. So the biggest advice I would give to anyone, and certainly to anybody thinking of going to law school, is end up with a job you love, because you will spend, the reality is you spend more time with your job than you do with your family. And there's nothing worse than being trapped in a job that makes you miserable. And, if Sunday rolls around and you have a pit in your stomach about going to work the next day, that is a sign you need to change jobs quickly. Life is too short. Find something you're passionate about. Find something that you love doing, so you don't think about it as spending a lot of time, because you're doing something you really enjoy. I really encourage everybody to try to find that for themselves.
That's great advice. And where did you go to undergraduate to?
I went to UNC Chapel Hill.
Okay.
Wonderful college experience, and then I went to UNC for law school as well. I went straight through from one to the other.
Well, that's great. Well, I have a daughter that's a Tar Heel. It's a great university. And I guess the other question that just came in is just the practice of law in general, all COVID-19, just in terms of virtual interaction with clients, billing time out. I mean, I think COVID is going to have an effect just on pretty much all areas of the economy, in addition to healthcare. And so I think everybody is just really nervous about, going to virtual school. Our son starts school on Monday, very different. I miss the drive to school. I miss seeing the kids after school. It's just a very different time, but hopefully we can work through it, right? And, do you have any final thoughts about just what you're feeling right now? I know you're also campaigning, but what do you, you know, what is this, as a leader in our state and as a member of the court, what has it been like living through a pandemic, raising a family, being a justice? Um, I don't, it's a hard question, but I'm just curious as another leader, is it
Sure.
taking
I
it
mean,
one
like
day at a time?
everybody, we're going through something that no one alive has ever gone through, that no one in America since the 1890s, or I'm sorry, the early 1900s, that is. My brain is tired, excuse me. It was the last time we've been through this. And so there's no frame of reference for all of us to draw upon. And one thing that I keep thinking about is with most disasters, whether it's a quake or tornadoes, those are regional, but this is different. This is affecting every single person in every single country on every single continent at the same time. And there really are not words to describe it, as all of you know. But as far as the law, one of the things we're realizing now that we never thought about before is that the practice of law involved routinely bringing large groups of people together and putting them in a room with a closed door, sitting at close quarters. And up until now, that was never a problem. But of course, right now, it's a huge problem. And that's why we've really had to rethink everything about the practice of law. And I give such credit to our Chief Justice, Sherry Beasley, who has done everything humanly possible to keep our courts running efficiently during this crisis. And, like all professions, Steve, like you said a minute ago, we're learning how to do things more efficiently through the use of technology, that hearings can take place with technology, mediations can take place with technology, client meetings can take technology. The thing we're having the hardest time with is jury trials. For obvious reasons, it's a little hard to do that virtually, but it's a lot of smart people are thinking about this problem, and we will get through it. And hopefully the takeaway, the silver lining will be, after COVID is long gone, hopefully we'll keep some of these more efficient ways to get things done, like all professions.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to end the program. I mean, we appreciate your time. I mean, I think that, oh yeah, is there a place they can go to learn about the Supreme Court, a website they can go to? What's the website for our High Court?
We do. It's the NC Judicial Branch website. If you Google that, you will have some great information about the court. And one of the great things that was put into place before COVID struck was the North Carolina History Museum set up a wonderful, wonderful exhibit commemorating the 200-year history of our court. Obviously, the museum is closed and will be for the next few months, but I do encourage folks to go out and check it out if you haven't already when things get better. I was just talking to the director of the museum yesterday, and he said they're planning to keep it going at least through the spring.
Oh,
obviously, we all hope to be in a much better
I
place.
love that museum. I mean, when I'm in Raleigh, I love to go there. And my favorite exhibit was actually the World War I exhibit. And before that, they had the Richard Nixon Watergate. And Rufus Edmisten unveiled his book there and talked about it. And I literally was going to go there the week before COVID. I want to go back and look. And then I've never been. Those little things that we took for granted, going to a movie, going to see a friend, going to lunch. I mean, I guess if there's any silver lining as we close out the program, it's just to remember that we're all in this together. There's really only two sides to an issue: good and evil, bad and good. And we've got to do the good thing, which is work together as North Carolinians and Americans to fight this war, the storm that we're in on our healthcare system, our economy, our minds, and I think it's the uncertainty that drives people crazy sometimes as I'm out there talking to people. But what we can be sure of is that this country can get through anything. And oftentimes I have to hear, I'll go read some of President Roosevelt's speeches, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, about how America won World War II, how they rallied America to fight the Depression. And I reminded my own children that they were actually Americans that existed. It wasn't someone out of a folklore. There was this guy Roosevelt who was paralyzed, had polio. Could he really run the country through this kind of a crisis? And he did, and America did, right? So on that note, Justice, we want to thank you for all that you do. I want to thank you for being a part of North Carolina history. And we wish you all the best over the course of the year, along with you and your family. And we will have you back on the show again, because there's a lot to talk about with our courts. So I know you had a long day. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening. We'll be back next week for another edition. Happy Indian Independence Day, Saturday, lots of events. And I forgot to admit, we're also going to be interviewing the Sharma family, who founded the Hindu North Carolina temple. And that's going to be at 5 o'clock. So it's a busy radio weekend. But thank you so much, Justice Davis.
Thank you, Steve. It's been a delight being with you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll be back. Be safe, everyone. We'll see you on Saturday. Thank you.